No hamburgers are safe. No hamburgers or sibilants.
Or siblings.
Did you say siblings? I said sibilants. You sick bastard.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time for Garfield and Friends. That just happened in my head. Actually, it's time for Rock and Roll, the podcast, featuring Dr. Nick Redbone, Tom Nelson, and me. Today's episode is brought to you in part by
The shovel, because you're going to need one over the next 19 days.
Indeed, welcome to Rock and Roll, the podcast, episode 11.
Actually, by the time this airs, it will be 18 days.
It'll be 18 days.
Ooh,
18
look,
days.
time travel. That's fantastic.
Wow.
18 days
How does
until
that
it's
happen?
all over. And by the way, his name is Brock. That's
Hi,
Brock
I'm
Johnson.
Brock.
Brock Johnson, ladies and gentlemen. And today, we're going to be discussing Rockstars behaving badly.
Because, they have.
Yep. It's not, I don't think it's funny that we don't hear about it as much anymore, especially considering the social media that's why we
I
don't
think that's
hear about
why.
it.
It's like, I did that last weekend.
Right.
I mean, you know.
Yeah. What we're talking about is the legendary stories about the rock stars, whether it's backstage at the show, whether it's back at the hotel, whether it's on the tour bus. You put young guys out on the road, away from prying eyes. You give them lots of drugs, you give them lots of booze, and you give them lots of time.
And money.
And there's your problem. When they get bored, they go off. Now, first of all, here's a question. Is it because of the personality type that it takes to be a musician, to be a top-tier pop star? Is it the personality type that makes you unstable? Or is it the job itself that eventually pushes you over the edge?
Maybe a combination of both.
Okay.
I think it's a toxic combination. You'll read stories about these artists who have these grueling schedules. I mean, they'll play a show until midnight. And then they've got to go sign autographs at the merch table or whatever it may be. And so by the time they're back on the tour bus passing out, it's like 2 a.m, and then they have a radio interview the next morning at 6:30.
Right, in the next town.
Right.
So the bus is going to roll all night to get them to where they're supposed to be.
Those radio guys. A bunch of
And
bastards.
so they end up pumping themselves full of cocaine or whatever it may be because it's the only way they can function.
Yeah, I think they start, not all of them, obviously. And that's the thing. For everybody that we mention in this, there's going to be 10 of them that weren't a part of the mayhem.
And that being said, too, I think, some of these stories, you're going to have to take them with a, wheelbarrow of salt. We weren't there.
Exactly.
Some of them, you wonder, really? But on the other hand, it is rock and roll, man.
Well, and the funny thing is, especially in the 70s and the 60s, the real crazy days, the ones that tend to be sort of the golden age of bad behaving rock stars.
Kind of set the bar at first.
Yeah. I don't think they went out of their way to dispel the stories.
Oh,
you know what I
no,
mean?
it's all part of the
Well, it's kind of a
legend.
good story to chase around.
Yeah, you get that sort
it's
of
like a trophy.
Exactly. You get that gunfighter resume behind you, and people go, "Oh man, it's going to be great. He's crazy. You don't know what's going to happen next."
Yep.
Well, and the other thing, going back to social media, is that in the 70s, you had to believe the story because that's all there was.
Sure.
Now, a lot of this stuff ends up on YouTube. I mean, they'll actually film whatever it is happening. In fact, the couple of rock star behaving badly stories that are in my head, there's video evidence of it. I mean, it's on the internet.
And I think if we go back to, and we talked about this a few episodes back, when your favorite band came to your town and said your town's name from the stage and partied at your Holiday Inn or whatever, you wanted everything that you heard about these magnificent magical beasts to be true.
Sure.
So that was, I think as fans back in the day, we were far more likely to say, "Oh yeah, I heard that actually happen. I heard from a guy that was," you know what I mean?
Oh,
and
yeah,
it grows and it grows and it grows. So how many of these are true? I don't know, but we'll dive into some of them now. I think for us I think we have to start with Tommy because Tommy is our resident Rolling Stones aficionado.
Yeah.
And when it comes to, at least Keith Richards once said, I've never had a problem with drugs. I've just had a problem with police. Keith,
That is so Keith.
You know, Keith is
So
kind
Keith.
of the poster child for that.
Yeah.
He was one of the original gunslingers that I was talking about.
Yeah.
So give me a Keith story or two.
Well, you know, there's the classic, more recent one of him taking his dad's ashes and mixing them up with the marching powder. And, you know, doing a few lines that way.
He snorted his
father.
dad.
Yes.
Yeah.
It to honor his dad. Yeah. Hey, Dad.
And he admits it.
Yeah.
I've heard it from his
Oh, yeah.
mouth.
Yeah, yeah.
That isn't a. He's proud of it.
Oh, yeah. And
Do you think his dad would be proud of it?
No, probably not.
You know, maybe because him and his dad were estranged for so long, they finally got together later in his years, and they started palling around.
Yeah.
So I could almost see his dad being, "That's my boy."
That's my boy. Yeah,
That's
because
my
by the
boy.
time they reconnected, they were now two old men.
Yeah.
So yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, he had his fun with the H. You know, back in the day in the
He
late
had a heroin habit.
70s,
Yep.
right? And you know, he would stay up for days. We were talking about this earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Supposedly stayed up for 5 days, which is tough to do. But also, there is a rumor that he stayed up for a total of 9 and woke up in a pool of blood. Now, we kind of think we're calling BS on
Yeah.
that. I mean, no matter what you're on, 9 days, your body, if
Will
9
shut
days,
down.
no way. It's like, no, I'm out.
Yeah, we're not built for that.
I can remember growing up, we had a Nintendo club, and that was our goal, was to stay up all night so that we could keep playing Nintendo
Right.
through the whole
That is
night.
awesome.
So it's
man.
like, so what you're saying is it's like Keith Richards, you and the Nintendo Club, like neck and neck as far as really bad behavior.
No. What I'm getting at is that you would hit like, well, yeah, that's exactly
Yeah.
right. No, you'd hit like hour 24.
Okay.
You're like,
Right.
so 9, I mean, even 5 days. That's
Insane.
ridiculous.
That's great, though, dude. That's awesome.
That really
we
is.
were really rebellious in the Nintendo club.
Sure.
5th grade. Whoa.
Now, and if we want to continue along that Stones jag, you have, speaking of Jags, you got to look at Mick Jagger circa 1981, 82. What is the concert film that we're talking about, Tommy?
It's one that Hal Ashby directed. It's called Let's Spend the Night Together. It's from that 80-81 tour.
Uh-huh.
And it's great, but it's so high energy. Mick is jumping out of his skin. You know, he's making the moves like Jagger, like in double time.
Yeah, it's like somebody put fast forward on the VCR
Yeah.
and it's just spinning.
And all the songs are just like careening to the end. You know, they're going so fast.
There's so
You know,
much cocaine.
It's entertaining as hell, and I enjoy it. But yeah, it's like you watch that film and you're kind of like,
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You start twitching.
yeah, you're
Oh,
like,
man.
hey, man.
He's, oh, yeah. Let
me make a phone call.
Mick's all geetered out. If you go and look at even the videos, look at the video for Start Me Up, he's coked out of his gourd.
Well, yeah, and in that video specifically, I think they'd also been hitting the bottle pretty hard. Ronnie Wood and Keith in that thing.
Oh, really?
They're like ghosts in that. You've seen it.
I
so-
need to go back and look
Oh,
now
my
because
gosh.
I can't take my eyes off Mick.
Just the look in their eye, the sunken eyes, and they're just all.
Okay. The riff of the living dead.
Yes.
Yeah, they exist,
Yeah.
but barely.
Right.
Exactly,
And, you heard about, there were other bands that would have, it was like when it came to the late 60s and the early 70s, well, no, late 60s for sure, the Stones kind of sucked all the air out of that room. I mean, everybody else could kind of get away with stuff because everyone was watching them. I'm sure the Beatles had their own, misbehavior as well.
Oh, yeah.
But no one was going to, as long as the Glimmer Twins were out doing
Yeah.
what they were doing, that's Mick and Keith, no one else was paying attention to the other guys.
Now, you talk about bad behavior in the Stones, too. Don't overlook bassist Bill Wyman, who, no, he wasn't a party guy. He didn't do drugs,
Right.
might have had a little wine or sherry or whatever it was once in a while. But this guy was the hound dog of the Stones.
Right.
You would think it would be Keith or Mick. No,
he liked him young, and he liked him young.
He liked him young. He married, Mandy Smith, I think was her name. I don't know how old she was.
I want to say
14,
15,
16.
It's like Jerry Lee Lewis.
And he was
young.
in his 40s, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
But no, he wrote a book called Stone Alone, and he documents a lot of these conquests of his. And supposedly, too, when he would play in concert, the reason he holds his bass the way he
Yeah,
does,
because he plays it upright.
he would use the neck to block out the light so he could get a better look at the birds in the audience.
Oh, man.
So don't ever overlook Bill Wyman, the Quiet Stone man.
Did you just say planning?
Yeah, he's planning.
He went in
what
there.
they call it now?
He went in there
Proper
with,
planning prevents poor performance.
look at the alliteration.
wow.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I haven't heard that for a while.
On that note, let's take a pause for our friends on YouTube to celebrate Broc's alliteration. Like and subscribe. We love you on YouTube.
Oh,
Hey.
yeah, and the button.
Oh, yeah. Right down there. It's down there in the corner.
As it turns out, I can't put a clickable crotch on the video. You've got to put the
Down in the
little
corner.
logo down there.
We're probably not pointing anywhere near it, but it's over in that corner. Just go there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen interviews where the Stones are talking about, and a lot of those guys, it's like they tried to keep count of the number of women
yeah.
they had, and and they're 4-digit numbers.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of which, Gene Simmons, who I for a number of reasons, I think he's a reprehensible creature.
Yeah,
he really is just about the grossest thing on two legs. But he
Making the bank.
alleged, yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, they love the money.
Well, that was the bottom line with Gene Simmons.
Oh, for
though,
sure.
And that's what made him gross.
Oh, for sure. That's yeah.
I think every band, when you sign to a major label and do your major label thing, to an extent, yeah, you're selling out because you want the cash. But this guy takes selling out to, I mean, he redefines.
Yeah, there's nothing he won't put a logo on.
And unabashedly unashamed about
Oh
it.
yeah.
doesn't care.
But
Doesn't
now,
care.
but speaking of him being a dirtbag, and there's a million ways that he is, he kept. Apparently, he has a photograph of every groupie he ever slept with, and he's got them in photo albums. It's like 4,000 women.
Like an encyclopedia kit.
Yeah, he's a super spreader of ew.
That'd be a nice coffee table book. Hey, look at
Don't
this.
give him any ideas. It'll have a logo on it. He'll sell it for $199 at holidays.
It'll be in the gift shop at his restaurant.
Yeah, and everyone will buy it. You know what his restaurant? I bet you his restaurant in Florida is a seafood place. Crustaceans are us.
I missed it.
The Gene Simmons. Moving on. While the Stones, huh?
I was going to say, I think that's a perfect segue into marine life.
Oh yeah, exactly. Look, I remember when I was trying to say that maybe the Stones took all the attention in the early 70s. That's not quite true.
Oh, this was the story you were telling me about off camera last week.
And I'm going to go ahead and say this. And mind you, I'm a super fan of this band, so I may go overboard. But as far as the worst of the worst behavior from a band, I don't know that I've ever heard anything that tops Zeppelin. I think Led Zeppelin set the bar, and then the hair bands in the 80s just tried to keep up. And they were pale imitators because Zeppelin did it all first.
Yeah. I'm just excited in my head. I'm already building this up as to how you're going to tell this story appropriately.
Yeah.
So that it remains PG-13.
Yeah, there's a million of these of the Zeppelin stories, but the one that we're all leaning towards actually even has a Frank Zappa song written about it.
Of course it does.
The song is called Mud Shark, and the event is known as the Mud Shark episode. Now, bear with me, brace yourselves. This is going to get weird.
Yeah.
So Zeppelin, this takes place in 1969, maybe 1970. They're staying at the Edgewater Inn. So this would have been them touring on Zeppelin 2. So the Brown Bomber, they've got 2 albums worth of material. They're young, they're hungry, they're crushing it. They're making big money because Jimmy Page negotiated a phenomenal deal with Atlantic. But they're still getting away with stuff because the Stones are still on the road too. So they're staying at a place called the Edgewater Inn in Seattle, which was very popular among rock stars because you could fish right out the window. It's right there. So the roadies and the road manager and Zeppelin had been catching sharks, snappers, but mostly mud sharks. That's what they say. And we're hanging them in the closet. They would take.
Now, how big is a mud shark? What's a mud shark?
I'm guessing like 2 feet.
They're not real huge.
It's not a
no.
real huge fish.
I'm not Jacques Cousteau or anything. They're not real big. Yeah.
They're hanging them in the closet on coat hangers. They're just putting the hanger sides through the gills and hanging them like coats.
As you should.
As you should, right?
Great visual. That is.
Yeah. So
Closet by day, closet by day, stringer by night.
Fish were coming up in the window and TVs were going out the window.
Right.
So a young lady who loved the bands and loved to be a special friend.
Fanatical.
To all of the members of the band, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
Found herself in one of the rooms there in the Edgewater and certain members of the band wanted to introduce her to the biological splendor of the Edgewater Inn in the most intimate way possible. Let's take a pause just to air out our brains and to go to YouTube and quietly say we're sorry.
We're so sorry. So sorry. We just got into some Connie Francis there.
All right, there we
you guys
go.
don't even know who Connie Francis is. Do you?
Not a clue.
I kind of know who Connie Francis is. I had a dad.
Yeah?
So, yeah, and he was old. So
Now he's dead.
Now he's dead.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Real dead.
You bet. He went. Oh, Tommy's checking. He's fine.
I'm still
You're
here.
fine.
Okay, good.
You're
Good,
fine.
good.
Now the same band, and I could do Zeppelin forever. I'm only going to tell two more that I know of.
That's it for the Mud Shark?
You're not going to go into it now?
Do I need to give any more detail?
Well, yeah, because we know the story. They don't know the story.
All they have to do is not be dumb.
Just
I said they were introducing her biologically,
Yeah.
intimately with the flora and fauna.
So
Mud Shark.
this involved
Mud
going
Shark.
to the Mud Shark closet.
Yes,
And
taking
removing a
Actually,
shark.
legend has it they pulled one right up. It was still alive, as it was used as
Thing.
as an entertainer.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Exactly.
well, you can purchase products from places like Adam and Eve.
Yes.
yeah.
You require one person to operate.
Right.
And
Yeah. This
benefit
one they just
from-
fished one out of the ocean.
yeah,
And
instead of AdamandEve.com, they just went
Yeah.
fishing.
it went
In a
to the
previous
Edgewater.
life, this shark was a gynecologist. I think that's the way.
Good night, everybody.
And we're out.
That's it.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
You bet.
Thanks for
Now,
shopping.
This same band, there's a legendary hotel in Los Angeles called the Hyatt House, the Los Angeles Hyatt House, which was renamed the Riot House because when Zeppelin checked in, they would book the whole top 3 floors and lose their goddamn minds. Motorcycles. If you've ever seen the movie Almost Famous, there's a scene with a motorcycle going up and down the hall. Okay, that's a Zeppelin story. That was John Bonham and Richard Cole, their road manager. They snuck a motorcycle up that Bonzo had bought. They snuck it up a freight elevator and were just riding it up and down the halls.
If you have the money, why not?
Yes, and then quietly off to the side, because Bonzo is this giant barbarian of a man who gets drunk and destroys things. Jimmy Page, on the other hand, was quietly devouring groupies. Apparently, he was another one that liked them all different ages, sizes, and shapes, and apparently used to check into hotels with a suitcase full of whips.
Oh.
Mr. Page.
Like,
Yeah.
or like whip it.
No whips.
Okay,
And riding crops and
Whip it good.
Yeah. And then, but you know how we mentioned that a lot of them, you know, for every guy we mentioned that was doing this stuff, there was 10 of them that weren't. John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin, you'd almost never hear a single story about him because he was so quiet. He just kind of went back to his room. I mean, I'm sure there were some drugs involved, and I'm sure there was a girl or two on the road. But for the most part, he ducked that. But then again, it's easy to duck it when you've got Pagey and Bonzo in the same band losing their minds, right? And of course, there's this great story. I told this one to Tom last week. If I didn't hear it from John Bonham's son, Jason, I wouldn't believe it. You can find him on YouTube telling the story. Jason Bonham says they went on vacation with their dad. And I'm assuming this is late 70s, early, right before Bonzo's gone. They vacation in the south of France. Bonzo says he's going out for a pint. He doesn't come back for 36 hours because he's been arrested.
Uh-oh.
He ends up in a bar in Monaco. It's John Bonham, English actor and famous alcoholic Oliver Reed, Ringo Starr, and Peter Sellers, the guy that played Inspector Clouseau from the original Pink Panther movies. These 4 random people all start power drinking together. They all get arrested at the same time because Bonzo flips out and throws a bottle at a waiter.
Okay.
They have shaved Ringo's head and eyebrows. Now imagine that poor cop when he rolls up. What the hell's going on here? Who's really on drugs? Is it them or is it me?
What just happened here?
I honestly, when it comes right down to it, John Bonham might have been by himself was almost every terrible story from the 70s.
Was this a family trip or was
This was a family trip. It was him and
man.
it was him and his wife and their 2 kids.
I wouldn't even get away with saying, "Well, I'm going to go to the bar." I'll be back.
Much less shave a Beatles head.
Yeah, I'm going to go hang out with Ringo, shave his head, and go to jail.
Yeah. How does that sound to you? See you on the beach. 2 days. It'll be fine.
Wow.
So the 70s were full of this kind of terrible behavior. And once again, how much of it is true? Robert Plant joked. There was a book that came out called Hammer of the Gods about Zeppelin. And I'm going to get off the Zeppelin train here, I promise. Robert Plant, when it came out, was interviewed about it. He said, and this book, I've read it, it tells all the stories in as much detail as they can get away with. And they said, so Robert, this book's out now. Do you want to comment? And he goes, oh, I don't know. I mean, those are a lot of wonderful things that people say happened. But I don't think they did. But then again, they might have. Who really knows? And he left it at that. You know what happened. You know what happened.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I saw him in concert 2 years ago. I may very well have chlamydia just from the speakers.
You were that
Again?
close.
I was that close to the show. So moving past the 70s, and we've bypassed several of the stories, but we've got to move into the 80s to get, if Bonzo was the king of bad behavior in the 70s, I've got one name.
For the 80s?
Ozzy.
Oh, yeah.
Ozzy.
Yeah.
Ozzy. What else?
Poster boy for bad behavior.
And once again, his stuff well documented.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Well, just the obvious one.
The bat story alone.
Oh, well, the bats, right?
Somebody throws a bat
Yeah.
on stage. He thinks it's a rubber bat.
Yeah, he thinks it's a fake bat.
So he scoops it up and he bites the head off of it on stage, only to discover it is a real
It's an
bat.
actual bat.
And it is alive. It is not a dead bat. He has eaten part of a crippled bat.
Take that, coronavirus.
Ooh.
Oh, well, back into war pigs.
Ozzy doesn't have coronavirus. Coronavirus has Ozzy. The same guy in a meeting with record executives. These are suits and ties. Bit the head off a dove.
That's right. I forgot about that.
In the middle of this meeting, they released doves to signal that he signed the contract, and it was a big PR deal. He grabs a dove and he bites the head off. There's a picture of him the moment after he does it.
Yes.
He's got a little drop of blood on his lips and one of his eyes is crossed. It's the craziest thing you've ever seen. And he's smiling like the cat who ate the canary.
Oh, yep.
Wow.
You've got to see.
yeah.
Ozzy was and is insane.
Oh, yeah.
He's not okay. It's not just drugs.
Oh, yeah.
Ozzy's not
He's
right.
different.
No,
Yeah.
before the drugs and before the alcohol, he was off.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Ozzy didn't he pissed on the Alamo, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah, he did.
I read the story.
He pissed on the Alamo and got arrested, and they banned him from playing in Texas. He was hanging out with Motley Crue and snorted a line of
I was going to say, yeah.
ants.
Our very own Nikki Sixx.
Yep,
And
Idaho
Ozzy,
native.
yep, doing live ants, on a dare.
But why?
Because you could.
Now let's break that down. This is why I asked earlier. Some of these people, when they broke incredibly. You know what I mean? Ozzy, it was broken. The business and whatever other mental health issues he has going on, and obviously a huge problem with substance abuse, broke him. Is it the job? Is it the excess that you are allowed to have, that you're expected to have back then, that makes you nuts? Or because Ozzy by himself is probably crazy.
Yeah.
Would Ozzy have been crazy without the gig?
I think it's when you're a rock star, when you're that level of fame and when you have that much money, it's like all of the things, because we all have fantasies and ideas and, oh man, if I had this, I could do this. You get to live that stuff out loud. You get to make it happen. Like the pretend stories of being psychotic. You can bring that to life, and it's expected because in that world, that's just what you do.
You can kind of
I
live
think
out the
in Ozzy's case, he probably would be without all the. If he wasn't Ozzy Osbourne,
Right.
there was something going on there anyway.
Right,
But but adding the whole, as you were pointing to, Brock, the whole scenario of being a rock star and everything. Yeah, that just took it up a notch.
Yeah.
And I think he rolled with it too.
I think with
Right?
and without rockstarism, he would have probably ended up in some sort of institution. He would have been institutional.
Oh, for
Exactly,
sure. He would have
yeah.
been eventually gotten arrested and diagnosed. And
Instead, he found drugs, alcohol, and fame, and now it's his gimmick.
that's it. That's what he
exactly.
does, and he's managed to make a living out of his mental illness, and and obviously his incredible talent. But it didn't hurt that his character was, this guy's legit out.
crazy.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
what's going to happen.
Yep.
Now, the 80s was full of, I said earlier that bands like the Stones, bands like Zeppelin set the bar so high or so low for such terrible behavior that there were a bunch of the hair bands that were just trying to, it starts to feel a little fake with a lot of them. One
I
band,
think hair bands in general are fake.
well, they
I mean, look at the getup, look at the hair. It's such a gimmick.
yeah, and that's a show for, we could do a whole show on just the evolution of hair rock and hair metal as it is. But there was like any movement in music, there were the first generation hair bands.
Mm-hmm.
Quiet Riot comes to mind. Early Motley Crue comes to mind. I know I miss White Snake is probably in there as well.
Yeah.
But
GNR.
okay, well, they're a little bit later. They're 86, 87. But when you look at those first early 80s bands, they were the first ones. They were the originals, and Motley Crue refused to be outdone. They set the bar for bad behavior so low that they made sure that everyone else was only going to be pretending to keep up.
They were just pretending to be Motley Crue.
They were exactly. They were with Ozzy when he snorted the ants. Tommy Lee's been arrested for drunken fights dozens of times with famous people. Vince Neil was going to fight Axl Rose. I remember that was it was going to be a boxing match.
I would pay to see that today.
Me too. Just a couple of big heavy guys just clubbering at each other.
They call it a truce and end up going out for sweet and sour chicken.
They end up at the Waffle House.
I'll tell you what, I can't get enough of this gravy. How about a boat of gravy?
Patton Oswalt has a bit about when the GNR reunion thing happened and they came out, and he had obviously put on some pounds.
You're talking about Axl, yeah.
Yeah, and he comes running out to perform this like he did in his prime. And he's like, "Welcome to the
Yeah.
shut it up." He's so out of breath.
Yeah. Motley Crue not only had all of the fights and everything, but as far as substance abuse, Nikki Sixx wrote, and he's still his recovery is still very much in his music and in his lifestyle.
Yeah.
But Nikki had a heroin problem, a big time heroin problem. It killed him. He overdosed. He was dead.
right.
Kickstart My Heart is about that moment.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. I
had no idea.
Yeah, he overdosed. That was it. Kickstart My Heart is the defibrillator.
Yeah.
And there's a story, and I want to touch on this just for a minute because we skipped a little bit. Johnny Cash can sometimes be considered almost rock and roll. He was the Man in Black. Right. He was around when
What
Jerry
do you
Lee
mean
Lewis was
almost
happening.
rock and roll? He is rock and roll.
Pretty rebellious, pretty rock and roll. So the Stones checked into a hotel. It was a Holiday Inn somewhere in Texas or wherever. And they walked in, and Keith said he could immediately smell paint. Like, just the hallways reeked of paint. And he finally asked the manager, he said, "Are you guys renovating or something?" He said, "No, man." Johnny Cash and Lester Perkins were here. Lester Perkins was Johnny's guitar player. They were here last week, and they decided to paint a room orange. They painted a hotel room orange. Not just the walls, the curtains, the carpet, the beds, the TV,
All of it
the bathroom,
orange.
the bathtub, the sink, the curtains, everything orange.
Wow.
Pills are good. Pills are good.
And and legend has it, and it's probably not true. If it is, I would love for it to be true. That when Nikki overdosed, Waylon Jennings was in the studio, and somebody said, "Hey, look at this! That kid from Motley Crue overdosed on heroin." And Waylon allegedly, it's probably not true, allegedly said, "So what you're telling me is that kid can't handle his shit." So don't think the country guys are this aw shucks ma apple pie.
Especially that world of country.
Those outlaws.
yeah.
And I mean, come on, Willie Nelson has been smoking weed for nearly twice my lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I guess
he
that's
could
not
walk
true.
by us and we'd get high.
Exactly. And Willie, come on by.
Yeah.
Willie?
Willie, if you want to be on the podcast, feel free. We'd love you.
Reach out.
Reach out.
I'd love to have you here.
Like and subscribe while you're at it.
We probably have some of your own 45s here in the back.
Absolutely.
True story. Right.
Okay, so I mean, and then you start to look at the bands. Guns N' Roses, though, another great example. Axl was always in trouble. Axl had a not only did Axl have a drinking problem, and all of them had a drinking or drug problem. Axl's an asshole.
Yeah, he has an anger management problem.
Yeah.
That's it. That's exactly it. He was always causing. I can't imagine being in a band with somebody that was that chaotic.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many riffs in that band because of him.
Very true. Very true. Yeah,
I mean, it was internal stuff.
Yeah, they just couldn't. They couldn't stand him, or one of them could stand him. So then they couldn't stand each other, and then it was insane. And that band lived right on the absolute dangerous razor's edge of rock and roll for their entire existence until Slash and Axl just could not get along with each other.
Yeah.
But there's video, once again, of Axl jumping into the crowd, swinging, throwing fists.
Yeah.
He's famous for picking fights with Vince Neil, and I think he and Sebastian Bach from Skid Row had a beef.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy, crazy stuff, angry stuff. And as we start to move into the 90s, the grim specter of heroin jumps up again, and it becomes a drug thing. And that's really sad. And I didn't know whether I wanted to stay with the backstage craziness or whether I wanted to dip into some of the drug casualties, because boy, the 90s.
Well, the grunge movement
A lot of
happened,
them,
and it's almost like grunge and heroin came hand in hand.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is.
I don't either. And it's so sad because so much of that music was so good. I mean, you look at the people that went. Shannon Hoon from my life is pretty plain. The B girl. Blind Melon.
Yeah, there
Yes.
you go.
Blind
No
Melon.
Rain. No
yeah,
Rain.
he died of a cocaine overdose, but it was still an overdose. Lane Staley.
Yeah.
Heroin.
Yeah.
The lead singer for the Screaming Trees, overdose. I mean, these, and then Kurt Cobain's mental health and his drug abuse.
The legendary Mr. Cobain.
Ends with a suicide. And he was the poster child of that entire, and there were guys that came out of there. Chris Cornell, his mental health, and looks like there were some drugs involved, and he just passed away. What, 2 years? A year ago? 2 years ago? And it's been just heartbreaking.
It was 2017. Because I was at Rock on the Range, and Soundgarden was supposed to play the first night. And that was a Friday. It was in Columbus, Ohio, and one of the record label dudes that we work with here at the radio station flew me out to do Rock on the Range, and we caught word when we got to town Thursday night that he had passed away, and so the next night, in place of Soundgarden, they had all of these other acts who were doing tributes to Chris Cornell. One of the most emotional moments was when Taylor Momsen from the Pretty Reckless got it, because they were on the road together. The Pretty Reckless and Soundgarden had been touring, and through that tour, Chris Cornell became her mentor.
Oh, wow.
And so she was broken. I mean, she canceled all meet and greets. She canceled all press. She didn't do any of it because, I mean, that legitimately tore her apart.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was when they did the toxicology report, I think it was like anxiety medication or something that somebody was supposed to be monitoring and they weren't, and so he had taken too many or something like that.
It was.
But yeah, their drugs played a role in that as well.
Yeah. Now I can tell you that. As we're kind of dipping into the mental health aspect of it, I can tell you that the last band I was in, and obviously there's no comparison to my band to any of these these legends we've talked about, but I can tell you that as my time in it was coming to an end, and I knew that the creative differences we were having were getting worse and worse and worse. It broke my heart. It really did throw me into kind of a spiral. Because I'd put so much time and so much love and so much dedication and effort into the band.
The band becomes your second family.
It really does.
Your brothers.
Yeah, it really does. And when those things go south, it's easy to get lost, to lose yourself and lose your head. And now just imagine that happening and you're out on the road. It gets real easy to dive into whatever you can get into your system.
Yeah.
Well, and think about this too. Let's take radio for just a moment. When we go out and do like a live broadcast, it's we make like $35 an hour or something like that, and the client is spending a few $100s, and so you have this pressure to do a good job.
Absolutely,
because the client's relying on you,
Yep.
the radio station's relying on you, and there's probably close to $1,000 on the line. Now take that pressure, but instead of $1,000 on the line, put $1 million on the line.
That's
that kind of pressure
That'll kill you.
alone is enough to drive you mad.
Yeah, that'll
and then
break you.
if you're dealing with mental health stuff on top of it all, if you get depressed, you can't stop because there's millions of dollars waiting on you.
Absolutely. And if for some reason, if there's anybody listening right now that has a mental health issue, don't even, there is no shame in asking for help.
Oh,
there
God,
are
no.
lots and lots and lots of places that will help.
Yep.
So, make sure that you take care of your head, because the opposite way, the worst way of doing it is burying it under alcohol, under drugs,
Right, yeah.
because that's where a lot of this bad behavior and later these deaths that we've talked about.
Yeah.
That's where they come
It's
from.
not a solution.
And
No.
mental health, really, two of the, as we kind of get to more current times, it's mental health that really comes into play in two of the big names, Wes Scantlin from Puddle of Mud and Scott Stapp from Creed.
Yeah, those were the two that were in my head too.
Yeah. Wes Scantlin, once again, it's turning into the, hey, Dr. Nick was in a band show, but I was in a band, and we opened for Puddle of Mud, and it was right after another incident had happened.
Well, on that particular tour, that had happened like 7 or 8 times where Wes blew it.
Yeah, and it was just days after one, and we showed up to open. We never met him. We sound checked kind of as the headliners were getting off the stage. His hired guns were getting off stage, so we talked to them for just a sec. But right up till showtime, it was like, I think he showed up while we were on stage. So he was kind of coming in just as we were finishing opening for him. They put on a great show. He did his thing. But it was like the next day or the day after, he had another complete meltdown.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was entertaining for me when he put Puddle of Mud back together. Different dudes. I mean, he's the only
original
member of Puddle of Mud that's in Puddle of Mud now. But when they came out with that single here a couple of years ago that we played on the Edge, I've messed it up again.
Yeah.
So nobody in the business wanted to give him a chance because he had blown it so many times. In fact, the big rock station in Denver, BPI. To this day, they won't play Puddle of Mud. And the reason is that when he lost his nuts and decided to ride the baggage claim carousel at the airport, caused so many problems for the radio station because they were tied into him. I mean, they were tied into him coming to town. And so, over time, listening to the record labels and the promoters trying to explain, no, he's a changed man. He's cleaned up. And as far as I know, he is, but nobody really knows because he hasn't done a lot of press.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, talking Scott Stapp, and I had a chance to visit with him here probably a year and a half ago, and he 110% owns the fact that he was broken.
Yeah.
And our boys in Messer were on the road with him.
That's right.
And they vouch for him. And I mean, Messer, they've become really good friends of ours.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, if they're going to vouch for him,
Then that's enough for me.
then it's legit. And getting on the phone with him, it was kind of a joke for a while that, Scott Stapp.
Right.
But then he gets on the phone and he gives this compassionate interview and says, I was in really awful shape, and without my wife and without the support from my family, I wouldn't be here today.
He completely broke.
He cleaned up.
Yeah,
He cleaned up.
Yeah, he really did. And it's so when you think about a lot of these stories, and I think it's neat that this kind of took this turn.
Yeah.
Because we started off celebrating this bad behavior, but let us be real. The kind of person that will ride a motorcycle up and down the hallway of a hotel, he's not okay. Now,
But he's still
some
my
issues
hero.
are there, yeah.
Bonzo was a family man, and he missed his wife and he missed his kids. And that's the story this book would tell over and over again, this Hammer of the Gods that I read. I think Stephen Davis was the author, if you want to find it. But he said, Bonzo, he'd be out on the road for a little bit and he'd be okay. But once he started missing his wife, Pat, and Jason and Zoe, his kids, he'd start to drink. And he was a mean drunk.
Well, and I think a lot of the stuff, for example, riding the motorcycle up and down the hallways, you're doing whatever you can to kind of fill that void, to fill that hole in your life. If you can't see your wife and kids and you're a family man, you're going to do whatever it takes to try and take your mind off of what you're dealing with internally.
Yeah. I've got $1 million home for my family that I never see.
Yeah. No thanks.
Nope.
No thanks.
Nope. It's a hard life, and that's why certain people, it breaks some people. Yeah. There are some people that wear that crazy rock star thing as a pose, as a gimmick. There are other people that actually lived it, but the ones that are still around today, the ones that survived, found a way to stop living it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the list of the casualties sad and long.
And it grows. It grows every day.
It really does. It really, really does. I think we've pretty much nailed this one down. I like the turn that one took.
Yeah,
And remember,
sorry for sadness.
Yeah, but once again, remember, take good care of your head, and there are lots of resources for you if you need help with your mental health, or if you need help with substance abuse. There is help out there. Don't ever think you're alone. You don't ever have to be alone. I know you could drop a line to any of us, and we would totally try and put you in touch with the people that could help you out. That's kind of the way we roll.
And if all else fails, Jack Daniels.
Jesus.
Oh, wait, did I just blow that? Yeah. I blew that. Yeah.
That was episode 11 of Rock and Roll the Podcast. Make sure to check us out on Spotify. Make sure to check it out here on YouTube. Make sure to like and subscribe no matter what service you use. Subscribe right here. Right here. And if you have any ideas that you would like to hear us do a show about, please feel free to drop us a note. Share this with a friend. Share it with a loved one. Share it with an enemy. But for God's sake, share it with somebody, because we want to grow this thing. We want to continue to bring you the expertise, the little expertise we have.
The expertise.
Yeah.
Who the hell do we think we are?
I'm trying to sell the podcast.
Oh, sorry.
Until the next time, my name's Dr. Nick. That's Tom Nelson. That's Brock Johnson. Peace, love, and rock and roll. We are out of here.
Jack Daniels.
Like and subscribe.
Gentleman Jack's only a couple pennies more an ounce.
Stop.